Hi, and welcome to another video. In the last video we had a look into the padding modifier. We checked how it's implemented, so we've seen this extension method over here, and we've also seen this class where we have the padding modifier implementing a layout modifier. In this video I would like to go a step forward and implement my own modifier. But maybe instead of looking into the implementation of a layout modifier again, let's try a different one, because there is a couple of different kinds of modifiers. You can see I have this simple application created over here, which has nothing more than a column and two elements, which is the text and a button. I've added the background to both of them. I've done it on purpose because if we have a look into the implementation of background, it's a draw modifier. And today I would like to implement my own draw modifier, which will be very similar to a background. Just in my case, I would like my background to be dotted. So instead of drawing this rectangular shape in the background, I will just draw a bunch of dots. Let's go right to it. First of all, let's create our own extension function. Let's call it a dotted background, and it's a function. Now here we will return this .then method, and inside of this .then we will declare an instance of our modifier, dotted background. Now this class of course doesn't exist yet, so let's create it. A class dotted background. Now this will implement the draw modifier, and we can see already that we need to implement something. So let's implement the method, and we need to implement the draw method. And the draw method, it's implemented or overridden on the content draw scope. And this content draw scope, it gives us first of all this draw content method over here, which we will see into in a moment. We need to use it. And it's also implementing the draw scope, which is implemented density, which is giving us a couple of other features. But what is important over here, we have access to, of course, the size or to the center. And also we have access to these methods like drawLine or drawRect and so on, so on. Over here we have a drawCircle, which we will use to draw our circles. Usually when you are using any tool to draw something on a screen that is not predefined, like a composable, then we use a canvas for it, and we draw to the canvas. And the same thing is happening over here, just these methods, they are simplifying using the canvas for us. So instead of having the actual instance of a canvas and locking it and drawing on it and releasing, then we just use these methods, and all the locking, releasing stuff is done for us somewhere under the hood. So also we will use this drawCircle. You can see that it can take a brush, it has a radius, center, and stuff like that. In other implementation we have a color, for example, instead of a brush. Therefore, let's go back into our implementation, and let's already use this dotted background modifier over here and also over here. Let's save that. Let's run. And now notice what happened. I've added this dotted background, but now we have the padding, now we have the background. We have our dotted background, but we don't have the content. So, for example, the text is not drawing the text, and the button is not drawing the button contents, like this text. And this happens because this modifier does not take care of drawing actually what the children of the composition tree have. And for that, we've seen that we have this method over here, draw content, which we have to call in each of these draw modifiers. Now if we run again, and there we go, we got everything looking as before, and because we didn't draw anything extra on the screen, then everything looks just exactly like before. Let's implement our circles. For that, let's have our own method over here, draw circles. Now this method doesn't exist, so let's create it. There we go. And at the beginning, notice that we don't have access to this drawCircle method over here, or the other methods that you've seen before. And this is because we have to create this method on this content draw scope. And right now we have access to all these handy methods over here, like draw circles. Now let's quickly think how we can draw circles. So I would like to have a couple of columns and rows, if you have a look here at the bottom, that will be drawn in the background. And this will be a couple of columns and rows of circles. So a circle usually has some radius, and it also will need some color. So we can pass this radius and color as arguments. Let's say first we have a radius, which will be a float. And let's also have a color, which will be of type color. Now let's pass it also to the class. And now the class also needs to implement this too. So we will have some private val and let's say also r for radius. And let's say we have also a color right now for color. There we go. Then let's say that our first element, the text, will have circles of radius 8 and color red. And let's say here we will have circles of radius 15 and color green. And of course we have an error because this should be float over here, and also this should be a float. There we go. And finally we can start drawing our circles. First of all, we need our diameter, which is basically the width and the height of each of the circles. And diameter is nothing more than just the radius times 2. Next, we need to figure out how many rows, so rows count, we will need, and also how many columns we will need. So for that, we can basically take the size, and in case of rows, we can take the height, and then we can try to divide it by diameter. This will basically tell us how many circles will fit. The only problem with this is that this will give us some float over here that is not necessarily a full number, it's not an integer. So we can use the floor method over here. Let's import that and let's make it to integer to get some integer instead without any decimal parts. And one more thing is, in case our diameter over here is bigger than size than height, then in this case we will be getting 0, and this is not something we want to. We want to have at least one row and one column, let's say. So for that, let's use coerce at most, and let's constrain it to height. We've had a look at this coerce at most method in one of the previous videos, and what happens now is, in case the diameter is bigger than height, then height will be written instead of the diameter. And then if we just divide height by height, we will get 1. We should also make sure that the diameter is never 0, because we should not divide by 0. But let's say that this edge case just stays out for our simple implementation over here. And then we also need columns, count, and basically we do the same thing. So let's take floor, size.width by diameter, coerce at most, size width, and then to int. There we go. So this will let us know how many columns and rows do we want. Then let's go into drawing them. So first of all, how it will work. Inside of this modifier, we will be drawing relative to this button. So our x0 and y0 is over here on the top left of the button and not on the top left of the screen. And then also we have to figure out then how to draw them. We will of course have some double for loop over here to just go through all rows and through all columns as well. And then let's quickly see how we can do it. So let's say we have one for loop. Let's say we have some row index and 0 until rows count. And then we will have another for loop. And this time until columns count. And this for loop will go through all the circles that we have to print. And now over here inside we can use this draw circle method. And this draw circle takes a couple of arguments, so we need the color, and we have the color coming through the argument, the constructor argument. Then we also want to know the radius, and we also have that. And finally we need to give it a center where this circle should be printed, and center takes an offset over here. So then offset has some x and offset has some y, which we have to figure it out. So now in case of an x, we will have here, so let's think, if we have this button over here, we draw the first circle, we have to give it a center of a circle. So in case of the first circle, you can just give it r and r over here, and it will draw the first circle over here. But now in order to draw the next circle, so for example in the next column, we have to offset the x. So let's offset it by diameter, right? So now we have a diameter of one circle, which will be, let's say that r is 5. So diameter is 10. And then the second circle in the second row will be drawn with its center at 15, because we have 10 plus r, 15. And then around it will be drawn the circle of the radius 5. And the only other thing that we have to take care of is that each of the next circles will be offsetted by the amount of circles that were already drawn. So in case of the first circle, this will give us 0, so we will draw the center at r. In the second, we will draw another circle at 1 times diameter 10 plus r 15, another will be 25, and so on, so on, so on. And then we have to do the same thing over here. Just instead we use the rows index. There we go. Let's make the code nicer. Let's run that. And I have clearly broken something down, and I think I see already my mistake, which is over here. It should be r plus and not multiplied. Let's run it again. There we go. We have our background, which is dotted circles kind of background, which are colors that we defined over here, red and green. And that's it. That's all the magic. You can do, so this is a very simple example. We just have the circles drawn, but you can do all kinds of drawing inside of this method. You can do your whole custom art, whatever you would like. However, for today, this is everything, and I code you to death, and I see you in the next video. Bye bye.